Good morning. I've got a lot of work ahead of me. Let me explain the dilemma. So, I want to build something inside of our raccoon here. Problem being, currently this is where I store everything I don't have a storage space for. So, if I want to work on this project, then I've got to get moving on building a bunch of buildings over here. First up, copper. Now, before I get to adding details to this thing, I want to have a bit of a discussion. I think it's something I've talked about before, but something I want to go into a little more detail on, and that is theming. What is it? How do you approach it? I don't entirely know, but I have a mindset, and this village is a great way of showcasing it. I've talked on and on about consistency throughout this village, and obviously, there is a ton of consistency. One of the key elements is these grass roofs, right? And the circularity of everything. So one thing that makes building here really easy is I can just plop some circles down and figure out where my roof lines are going to be, and I can figure out everything else from there. But as we're going to be adding a ton of buildings to this place, and they serve a function which needs to be recognized from a distance, I still need to give each building some individuality. If anyone was flying in from a distance, I would want people to recognize, hey, this place has wood, this place has dyes, this place has copper, which, besides the plant building, I don't know if I've done a very good job of. Like, my furnace and ores has the little chimney up top, but it's not very significant. The dirt place, it's pretty basic. This is just large building. I guess, yeah, the dye place has these silos, but they're kind of hidden unless you're actually there. So for all of today's buildings, I want to keep the theme of all these other buildings, tie it into the rest of the environment, but also really sell that point of individuality. I want every building to be unique. I want it to sell itself, right? I want it to be something cool on its own, but I don't want it to stand out so much that it's not a part of this anymore. And that's a balance that's really hard to strike. But specifically for this area, what I wanted to get into, what I'm going to do is this kind of outline with all the circles, and then figuring out this roof line, filling in the roofs, and then from there, figuring out what to do, right? And it just so happens to be, for this copper building, I already have that key feature laid out. I'm thinking big crane up top, a yard out here with a bunch of copper. No clue what's going to go on the inside, but at least for the outside, I've got an idea. I'm going to build it now. So, first building of the video, checking in. Did I accomplish the whole spiel I was going on about? I'd say so. Number one thing to point out, really far away, we've added something to the skyline, which I think is going to be really important moving forward. This place is supposed to blend in with the ground, but once in a while, having something other than just this tree pop up, it looks really nice. The depth effect we get here too with the building further back, this pathway developing a lot more. Imagine one more building back there. It's looking good. I tried a few new things with this building. I had these crimson trapdoors up here because they look all construction-y. So I brought that purple theme down and ended up going with this white and purple look. It looks really good. Really stands out. Ties in with the cherry tree and the greenhouse over here, which is something I'm just now realizing. And then the sides of this building, these are all blocks I've used before, except for the grates, but there's a few new details. Actually, mainly just one, which is these pillar things. Looked a little weird at first, but just kept adding things, and now it looks good. So I'd say so far, this has been a success. Of course, still many buildings to go. And before you ask, with how many buildings I'm doing today, I am not doing any of the interiors, but I will polish them up a bit, just like this one. And then I'll slap a chest in here and figure the rest of that out later. But yeah, just cleaning up this cliff, moving towards this direction because my next building I have in mind is going to be right on the lake here. Because the next chest I want to deal with is Prismarine. Wait, Prismarine. I'm starting to get the hang of it now. Using the Prismarine in the build, this trim with the glazed terracotta, Nautilus shell kind of inspired with the spiral going up and the lighthouse on the side. It's a weird roof, but I think it'll grow on me. Plenty of room in here to do whatever I want. I'm in a groove of things. Let's move on to that next one. That was a lot of time lapsing and a lot of building. So I'm gonna talk for a while and you're gonna deal with it. Side note, if you know what game that song is from, you're cool. Anyways, the 3 whole buildings I haven't really gone into detail about. I guess this one I talked about, the inspiration of the shell and the lighthouse. That's we can move on past this one. 2 buildings I really need to talk about in detail. First up, the coral one. Now I know I talked about that seeing from a distance, knowing what it is. You have no clue what this is from a distance. We can be honest. But I wanted a donut, 1, and 2, coral aquarium thing? I can add some fishes in here eventually in the future. Why is it raining? My nighttime atmosphere. It's gone. But yeah, this interior is going to be tough when I get to it because there's a lot of glass, a lot of windows, not much room to place things on the floor and such. This is why it's always a future me problem. Little balcony looking out. Imagine when all of this mud is placed and there's buildings all along here and this is developed into its own little town. This shoreline, this lake is going to be really cool. I'm thinking for an external feature, if I really wanted to highlight that this was coral, I could build some coral at the bottom of this lake and have it maybe coming out of the water, but then I'd have to build it out of blocks that aren't coral blocks, and inside there are the coral blocks. I would have to experiment. We'll see in the future. My mindset with the color scheme I picked, I have this really bright blue over here, so I wanted a color that complemented it, and that was this yellow at the base. But then we're working with coral, and when we're inside, if we have this really colorful wall and then this really colorful center, it's gonna be overwhelming, right? So the rest of the building, I went with these really unsaturated tones, the whites and the very dark browns or paler brick and granite colors. Nothing that is going to clash with what's going on in the center. I think that's something that's really important to consider. Obviously, this building, I don't really have to think about the woodworking place or the dye place when I'm building this, but immediately next to it, like this is a sight line in the foreground. How is that going to look? How are these two going to mesh with each other? And they're distinct. They're different. I think it's on the bolder end of things, but I still think it works. And that brings me over to here. I actually, now that I'm talking about this, I realize this, but I did this unintentionally. The blue and yellow awnings match the blue and yellow over here. That's just because I wanted a different color, honestly, than the purple, but oh well. Another happy accent to add to the books. If you can't tell, this is going to be a lighting storage place. Hopefully that was obvious. I had the idea of having a building along this cliff, and from there, the direction the path is going, how this all worked out, it really lent itself to this awning over the path design kind of thing. In the future, we're gonna have to go back and add a lot of features that aren't buildings, like carts or gardens, or I don't know, just little things on the side to make this place feel a lot more lived in. Trees. So it makes sense at some point that kind of extra detail is incorporated into a building itself. I think that's what these awning structures do. You know, they serve a function. It's cover from the rain or a surface for lights to hang from. It makes it feel a lot more lived in, and that's something I've talked about before. One concept I haven't talked about that stems from this building is building with the terrain. It was a while ago, maybe a month or two. I was in this build school thing, just a couple of friends getting together with a special guest, a bit of a teacher. And the teacher this time goes by the name of Wreckjaw. If you haven't seen Wreckjaw's stuff, you might have seen it over on Reddit if you use that. Some very cool builds he does. Deserves a lot of recognition. Go see him. But the main thing that I learned from that little session that we had was working with the terrain. Now, this is a very, very subtle example of it. There are much more difficult terrains to work on. But in this case, instead of flattening out a plane and then building something on it, I mean, that's what this is, with the exception of the little dip into the sand. Instead of doing that, just plop the blocks onto the land and see what happens. So this building, at least in this world, is my first attempt at that. And you can see it made for a much more interesting interior. We've got this dip down here, a staircase in the middle, a little elevation up here, and the two different entrances at two different heights. I think this is going to make for a much more fun room to decorate than any other room. I was talking about color earlier. Chose for the walls to be a very dark color because it's going to be a lighting place and it's going to be filled with lights everywhere, hopefully. I really wanted to emphasize the brightness of everything hanging from the ceiling. So I thought dark walls would do that. Maybe in the future I can go back and add some better gradients in to highlight that lighting, but I'm going to be covering these up and adding different ones, so not sure where those are going to be located yet. One last little detail. Added this tower to make the awnings make a little more sense, but also there's a little bridge here with one tall doors. I don't know what kind of lore this insinuates, but I think the idea that there's a bunch of little guys running around here is kind of funny, so I might work more with that in the future. Undecided on if I should add windows or not to this in the future. It's a direct copy of the one on the wood storage, but I don't know what it would be in this context. Maybe just an actual storage silo, but for a bunch of lights. And in that case, I don't see a reason for there to be windows. I'll have to develop some more of the buildings and the scenery around this area, because right now it looks a little blank, but I have a feeling if there are things blocking it and your eye doesn't go there, it won't be that big of a deal. But yeah, I think that's all there is to talk about for the builds themselves. I guess I move chests now? That's all the buildings I've built filled up, but I've still got a lot of chests. Starting this episode, I really thought I was going to be able to do all these. That was an ambitious thought. Let's at least pile these up more towards the storage area so I'm not going back and forth. And it's clean. We did it. Of course, I haven't built the buildings, so it's not like our problem is solved necessarily. We just have a new chest monster. What this will help with is the fact that all of my items are now around each other instead of half being here and half being over there. Pretty nice. And now my problems are exposed to the world, so I'll run by here every time and be reminded that I should probably finish working on this place. Plus, the animals aren't in the hole anymore. Good for them. This will be the end of today's episode. Bit of a shorter one. That's because I cut out a lot of the building process. But I hope it was enjoyable. I hope it was good. I need to fix the crane. But if you couldn't tell, I experimented a little bit with the style of my video. Little less music. I don't know if it worked or not. The way I incorporate music into my videos is one of my favorite parts of making videos. But I use it a little too much, I think. So the idea is to work with using less of it. That way I can actually mess with the silence a bit and utilize that gives the music a little more impact when it does come in. There's a lot of benefits to being able to not have music play all the time. But yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you. Appreciate it. Let me know how the new style is. Make sure to like and subscribe and do the things. Bye time. Bye. Bye. Bye.